Welcome to the Queer Spirituality Podcast. I'm your host, Julian Crosson-Hill. This podcast is about an idea. It's the radical idea that queerness is a gift and that the divine celebrates it rather than merely accepts it. We'll explore the special role that queer people are meant to play in the coming spiritual awakening. Through the lives and stories of queer people, we'll explore the many ways of approaching the divine and how the sacred reveals itself in everyday actions. Most of all, this is a podcast about love. It's about the love of the universe, it's about love between people, and it's about the love a community can share with one another. Thank you for joining me. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Queer Spirituality Podcast. I'm your host, Julian Crosson-Hill, and with me today is a special guest, Devin Hunter. Devin Hunter is the best-selling author of The Witch's Book of Power, The Witch's Book of Spirits, The Witch's Book of Mysteries, The Critically Acclaimed Modern Witch, and Crystal Magic for the Modern Witch. Initiated into multiple occult orders, Devin is the founder of the Sacred Fires tradition of witchcraft and co-founder of the Black Rose tradition of witchcraft. He hosts the Modern Witch podcast, recommended by both the AV Club and Glamour, and he's co-owner of Datura Trading Company. Visit him at modernwitch.com. Welcome to the show, Devin.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Devin and I have known each other for a while, so this is going to be kind of a casual conversation. Yeah, it's sort of like catching up. So one of the questions I always like to ask guests on my show, first off, just to get started, is what does queer spirituality mean to you?
Oh my goodness, that has evolved so much over the years. I actually remember when I met you, you were helping put on an event in Ohio that was for men who loved men. And I remember being there, having this great time, feeling like for the first time in my life, like my sexuality was something that could be part of my spirituality in a positive way. So excited. And then I got home and I joined the email list and I got into this really interesting discussion with some of the other people who had been there and really over their use of the term queer and identifying queer spirituality. And I had such a negative guttural response to this because in my head I was still 14-year-old 15-year-old walking through the halls of school being called a faggot and queer and all of those things. So it really bothered me and I was like, no, I'm not going to add that word to my spirituality. And then I walked away from that and I sat on that and I realized, holy crap, there are these people who are not just reclaiming the word clear or queer as part of their spirituality, but they're doing it in a way that's lifting other people up. And how amazing is that? And maybe if I just kind of shut up for a second and I just paid attention, I might be able to get something really great out of it. So that was the journey. That was the start of the journey. And every year I think I unfold I peel back a new layer of the onion and I'm like, so as a queer person, as an occultist, I feel like the occult is inherently queer. And no matter where you go, no matter which way you're looking at it, there's some queerness going on. So I find queer spirituality to really be identifying and celebrating those mysteries inside of ourselves, regardless of where they come from or how they might manifest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting that you had that reaction to queer because long ago, I had sort of a similar reaction to it. Even before we knew each other. And I think it's, in a way, it's sort of that toxic masculinity that gets embedded in us. As gay men, we identify as we're men, where we want to be perceived as masculine and all of these things we want to feel like we can pass, right? Because it's really about realness. Can we pass as straight? And queer feels like an insult to that, or we're being called out or something. And it's interesting to the evolution that we seem to go through in our journey to reclaiming queer as something that's positive and also allowing masculinity to be more of the spectrum that it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I know in my case, I I very like I tried so hard for so long to pass, and I didn't realize that's what was going on, but that's totally what was going on. And I can totally pass for a cis het dude walking around the streets until I open my mouth now, and then as soon as the purse falls out, it's all over. And I think, and it's funny because I really enjoy that. I love being this like kind of mask presenting person, and then you start talking to me, and then you're like that dude is a flamer. Like I love that. I love twisting that. I love seeing people's like click in their head, like, oh, he's gay. Like I really enjoy that now. Whereas before I would very carefully watch people's responses to how I would say words. And it was just, it's that living in your closet and not realizing how absolutely uncomfortable that closet is, even after, you think you've left it. And so it's this beautiful process of just discovering how queerness emanates from us, and then ultimately um, shapes the world around us and how we relate to ourselves, reality, with the way that we treat ourselves, all of that stuff. So queer spirituality is like, it's this term, and it's a big one for me, and it's evolved over the years.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I love that our spirituality and queer spirituality evolves for each of us over the years as we learn and grow. There's sort of this evolution of what these terms mean to us. It's interesting what you were talking about sort of passing and feeling the need for that. Like, you're from the Midwest, which is,
Mm-hmm.
where I live, and it definitely, I see that more here than like when I'm on either coast.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a big thing. It was coming out to California was I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area from like Podunk, like outskirts of Cincinnati, very small town, and it was and I had lived in Columbus for a while as a 19-year-old, and I got to go do the gay Columbus scene and got to go to the bars and do all the fun stuff. And then I was 21 when I moved out, or 22 when I moved out to California. So I had done the husband hunting. I had done the which is a big thing for the gay community specifically out there. Everybody wants a husband because you have to fit into the picture that everybody has painted.
Yeah.
And that, if they weren't like looking to settle down immediately, they were looking to do the exact opposite. And it was really just anxious. There was a lot of anxiety and like anxious energy in the queer community. And it didn't matter where I went, whether it was a club, a bar, whatever, right? Go to Comfest, go to Pride, there's just a lot of anxious energy. I remember being in Cincinnati, working for AIDS volunteers in Cincinnati, and being the condom fairy at Pride one year. And we went through the safe part of the town. We didn't do anything to rile any feathers up. We still had all of this negative, people still driving by saying stuff and whatnot. But going through and doing gay pride there was this eye-opening experience, because I thought, you get to a city, right? I'm in this small town gay boy, and you get to a city, and that's where all the stuff happens. No, Cincinnati's very tiny, and the pride community there is very tiny. And then Columbus was the natural progression, right? So you go up to Columbus, way bigger community, and I'm like, I've landed. These are my people. And it wasn't until I moved out to California that I realized, like, I'm a prude. And I was like, compared to my friends in Columbus and whatnot, I was a very open person who was very adventurous. And then I moved to California, and I realized, no, like, I'm a prude compared to these people. So it's a big eye-opening experience, not just, sexually, but just what people are willing to talk about. Very honest people on the West Coast, and for the good and for the bad, it is what it is. But whereas in the Midwest, it felt like the people there just try to survive because it's so hard to live in a certain environment. Out here, there's this complete rejection of that, where anything that makes us feel like we are being forced to just survive is anathema to our growth. And so we get upset about things in a way that I wouldn't have been upset. I would have been more willing to put up with certain things if I lived in Ohio, not coming out here having these experiences, than I would now. And I've been here for going on 14 years in a couple months, and I do not think I could move away from California. Like, I love the people, I love the way queerness is accepted here, even in the rural pockets and the very conservative pockets. I actually have a gig where I work in a very conservative part of California. it's nothing like it's nothing like liberal Ohio. I mean, it's very weird. It's very different. It's a very so I feel like I can be more of myself out here. I feel like I can explore what that means to be myself out here in a way that I didn't get to do in the Midwest. And I'm about to this week I'm flying back to visit my mom in Ohio and introduce my new legal husband to my parents. And I'm very like, okay, you've never been to Ohio. This is what it's going to be like. Expect this to happen and expect to see these signs and expect to have it. And so just preparing myself mentally to go back into the Midwest is it's making me really feel blessed to be where I am and to be loved by who I'm loved by and to have the family that I have where I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And Ohio is like living in another country because, you know, my mom is from Indiana, but I'm not from Ohio. You know, I grew up all over, you know, overseas and out in New Mexico. And so I'm much more liberal than even the liberal Ohioans. And so it is an experience sometimes being here.
Yeah.
It feels, yeah, it's definitely like another country. So you've written a number of books on witchcraft, and you teach in several different traditions. And you mentioned Between the Worlds, which of course was a festival of just all queer men. You know, being out in not quite a whole week, but being out in the woods, doing ritual, having workshops, and just being in that like all queer space. And now you teach very diverse audiences. Do you miss having that sort of queer dedicated space?
I don't, but it's because I have it. So I belong to a queer coven of gay men. So we are a coven of men who love men called the Brotherhood of the Satyr. And so I get my queer spirituality fix now because it's so important. And when I moved out here, my two partners, Storm and Chaz, because we're poly, so there's now four of us, but originally there were three. And when I first moved out here, they already belonged to this group, and they were like leaving on the full moons, and I'd be like, "What are you doing? Where are you going? What is this gay coven you're part of?" Right. So I definitely I showed up just to make sure they weren't doing anything that I wouldn't approve of, right? Like make sure they're not having sex in some gay orgy or something. So I went up thinking, you know, oh, I've got to protect my territory kind of a thing, very insecure little gay boy. And what I found was this community of gay men that sex wasn't at all like that's so not a thing that we even focus on. It's more about just being queer together and talking about our queer experiences and finding places within the spiritual world where there is a pocket of queerness. And like, as I said before, kind of celebrating that, bringing that out. A lot of that work is, you know, looking at different cultures around the world that, you know, members belong to and saying, hey, I found this myth that I had never heard of when I was a kid, and it's totally gay. So let's do, you know, and bringing those things into our queer space. And so I'm lucky in that I get that. I'm also partnered to Storm Fairy Wolf, who is a big old gay warlock who talks about queer spirituality all the time. So I get to be there and I get to support those things and be part of his process. And so I don't feel like I lack for that. I often feel like I'm not doing enough for the community though. So I've been kind of struggling with that little thought, this pride of like, you know what? My partner's doing this really great job at highlighting the community and being there for the community. And I think I had some tricky experiences early on when I first started writing and podcasting with aspects of the queer community. And so yeah. I think I got a little, I think I got a little gun shy, we'll say, about talking about certain things, just because I'd rather I'd rather not have to go through all of this stuff. But so, you know, as a result of that, I think I probably have stayed quiet in ways that I prefer not to. So I'm going to try to fix that this year. That's kind of a personal goal. Things I've been meditating on with pride.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with that. For those of you who are tuning into this podcast, maybe for the first time to hear Devin, Storm has been on the show a few episodes back. So definitely go hear what Storm had to say about queer spirituality. I want to highlight what you were saying there about when you first started writing and podcasting and some of the reaction you got, because I think sometimes that's a problem in the queer community, that we don't always support each other enough. And if someone is successful and for whatever reason, maybe we don't personally click with them or whatever, there tends to be this like shadiness that happens, oh, it's because of who they're with or because of where they live or because of this or because of that, and not because they worked hard for it. And
Hmm.
I know that you've experienced this in your work,
Hmm.
and I've definitely certainly experienced it in mine. And what do you think it is about the queer community that we can't just celebrate each other's successes together? Because I know in queer spirituality groups that are close that I've been part of, we do that, but in the
Hmm.
greater community, we seem to have a real problem with that.
So I think it gets down to that survival thing. And I've been I've gone through experiences where I was really hurt by people, and then I have to take a step back and take, all of the inventory, and what did I do, what was my part in it, but then also what were the circumstances and things surrounding that maybe highlighted some of those issues or something for people. So in my case, there's, I get the gay dudes who are a little jelly, especially when it comes to anything with love, because I have multiple partners. And so something I'm so sick of hearing about is like, oh, I can't even find one boyfriend and you've got three partners. I mean, I can't control that. I have no idea what to do about that. That's this beautiful thing that happened to me, but I'm not going to, feel bad about that. So I get that kind of stuff. And there tends to be a lot of dismissiveness even about my books because I have multiple partners, which is a very interesting, very strange thing to me. People refer to like us as the harem, which is just very dismissive, and I'm like, what does that have to do with me talking about ghosts? Like that's weird. So there's things like that I've got, and when I can just look and realize like this has nothing to do with me. I need to let it go. The real hard part has actually been dealing with like trans radical exclusionists. And how that has shaped the way that I will approach things. So early on, I was many moons ago, over like a decade ago. There was a big hot debate on whether trans women should be allowed in spaces or not, in all women's spaces. And I as a pagan, as an occultist, I'm like, we all deserve our own spaces, no matter who you are, regardless. I don't care what the rules are. You deserve your own space. Like we all deserve that. The language, however, was bothersome. The calling trans people trannies, and again, this diminutive language. Like you can say, "Hey, we need our own space," without hurting somebody else and like directly being offensive. And that was the stuff that I took offense to. And because here's the thing: trans people in our spaces shouldn't have to defend themselves. That's not their job. Their job is to show up and be spiritual. If you've been here for a minute, it is your job to stand up for people who are being put down or diminished. And so I stood up and was like, and all of you, and I said a lot of things I'm very proud of, and I stand by everything I said and did. And the result of that was people were trying to dox me. We had, which was funny because I owned a metaphysical store and I work for myself. So what are you going to do? But there was a lot of attacks and a lot of like weird, underhanded, very creepy, personal, like, I don't care. Like, you're upset because I said trans people should be allowed in a circle. Why are you trying to call my former boss to get me fired? Like, really weird stuff. So it just got to the point where I realized, like, this isn't spiritual. This is not in the way that I want to practice my spirituality. This is somebody's hurt, somebody's wounded and trying to hurt the rest of us. And I am not going to participate in that, but I'm also not going to let them continue to hurt people I love or continue to hurt people who are hurting already. Like, don't kick people while they're down, especially when they're coming to a place like queer spirituality to be healed and
Yeah.
to find strength and power. So for me, what grinds my gears more than anything is when we have it's the cutting out of certain members of the LGBTQ plus community. I am a LGBTQIA plus guy. I believe everybody should be here. I
Yeah.
believe because I benefited from that mentality when I joined. When I came out of the closet and I joined the community, I benefited from this huge diverse community of people and viewpoints and skin tones and sexual orientations and interests and spectrum identities and all of it. I benefited from having relationships with these people. And so to see the rejection of those people all of a sudden happening because of right-wing propaganda is really disheartening for me. So I will always stand on that soapbox. It'll be the hill I die on. I do not care. Empathy should drive our spiritual progress, I think, as a community, period. And when that stops happening and we get filled with all this ego stuff, we have to ask why. And it comes to that survival place. It always gets down to they feel threatened, their survivability, their identity feels threatened by this other thing that's going on. And it just simply doesn't need to be that. It's like, it's a
Yeah.
focus, it's a choice, and it isn't something that's great. So in the queer community, that's the stuff that bothers me probably more. I can handle the shady jealousy stuff. I can, like, I that's just people being people. But it's
Yeah.
the queer community's rejection right now of our trans family that's really getting under my skin more than anything.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I've benefited from having some very good friends who have been trans themselves, and sharing space with them, and just gleaned a lot of spiritual wisdom from them as well. So I remember when a lot of that was going on with PantheaCon and other organizations were struggling with those things, and it did get kind of ugly. And I think the queer community sometimes can get ugly. I left a group that had become very toxic, and went off to do my own thing, and it was unbelievable the poison and the vitriol that was directed at me because I chose to leave. And for a while, it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction. You kind of go, okay, I don't want to do anything with the queer community anymore. I'm going to go, pack up my toys and go play somewhere else, right? And just like go do that. But I like what you said about there were people who still need healing, and they're acting out of that place of being damaged or traumatized or whatever that they haven't healed from, that is causing them to lash out in that way. And if we as spiritually aware people say, okay, I'm going to pack my stuff and go somewhere else, how are they going to find that healing if we aren't there providing the evidence that it's possible, and pointers to the path?
Well, and then the other flip side of that too, because 1000% valid points were made there. But then the addition to that is that who's left to teach them, and
Yeah.
usually it tends to be the most damaged people, the most, and it's I'm
Yes.
not trying to be an asshole. I'm just like, this is the
Yeah.
observation is. And
Yeah.
those people tend to be destructive of other people when they're trying to build community. It's a whole thing. So there's a lot of psychology
Yes.
to all of this, but yeah. So my thing has been like I left a community, and a couple years later I saw that it's other people had joined and had turned it into a very just destructive thing, and realizing
Yeah.
that it was really, well, who was left to fill the void of the heart-centered person, and that person was just very destructive, and because they were out for their own thing, and that's it. At the end of the day, you're I never wanted to be a spiritual leader. Like, I hate that word, that term. It bothers me. I never wanted, and I think I had, like, when I was young, or me when I was like young, and
Yeah.
I had endeavors. I wanted to be a published author. I wanted to I wanted to be successful. That was a very important thing for me. Financial success is important because I have to pay bills, right? And there's a lot of sacrifices that go with this type of work that we do. And so if it isn't financially rewarding, it's a problem. So we've got those things, and I wanted to I wanted to be married. I wanted to have all of these things. Like, when I first set out to do this, I had a very different agenda. And you just grow. You just get up one day and you realize that you're full of shit. You're causing a bunch of shit, and you just need to move on, right? And it's this stuff that's like, you don't think about it because you're just swept up in somebody's drama or somebody's moment or somebody's whatever. But the big thing for me is I realize I really do like, I want to be liked. That always gets me in trouble.
Yeah.
I want to be heard. That always gets me in trouble. And I want to be like helpful to people. That always gets me in trouble. And those three parts of my personality, when you put them all together, makes me loud and obnoxious sometimes, and all of those things. And I can take up a lot of space that I don't need to take up. And I think a big part of that growing was just realizing you're taking up too much space, dude. Like, sit down, let somebody else talk, let somebody else show up to the moment. And that's what being a leader really is going through that process of stripping away all of that ego stuff so that you can show up and do work. So I never wanted to be a spiritual leader. I know that wasn't your plan either. It just kind of things happen, right?
Yeah.
Because somebody's got to show up to do the stuff. So when you leave, it's like, well, who's going to show up to do it? You don't even know. So that's the stuff that really, like, and especially in the Bay Area recently, we had a really large, like, I want to say around 1,000 people, like ish, group that was just completely destroyed because the high priestess was sexually abusing her members, and the whole thing just went kapluff. And it was the pinnacle of like what pagan community should be. Like on the outside, it was so organized. They had multiple groups. They were doing full moon everything. They were doing new moon everything. They were doing classes for all of those things that, like, in your head you go, oh, I want to do this one. They were doing all of it, and it was ruined by this thing that happened. And it was very destructive, and it affected not just their community but all of these other communities, because their community was so big that they had members in everybody else's communities. So it was one of these things that, like, the ripple effect was so damaging. And it was from this queer person who, we were like, oh, this is a queer leader we can stand by. And it was just this destructive thing. So it's like, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Your ego can get in the way, and if you're not approaching things for the right reasons, then you're just going to step in it. Like, it's just going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's an interesting dynamic that the people who often make the best and most heartfelt leaders are those who really don't want to be leaders, who sort of reluctantly end up in that role. And the ones that really you got to sort of watch out for are the ones who just desperately want to be a leader. So
exactly. That's like the number one is, do they want the job? Then they don't get the no. But that's kind of like what you like you stop and you go, all right, what's going on? Like, motive is very important with those things for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So you have a lot of projects that you are doing, Devin. You have done a tremendous amount of things with Modern Witch and Black Rose and all the different traditions, all the different books. What's next for you?
Oh goodness. Well, so I'm in a weird place in life, in a beautiful place in life, but I'm in the place where I realized the initial task that I had set for myself, which was to write what ended up becoming the Witch Power series. That's done. And so I had made deals with my spirits and my gods that I would do XYZ. And I did those things, and they have responded by giving me XYZ in return. So I've met my original goal, and then I wrote 3 books after that. And so I'm in this place of which are the pictorial books, which are great. I've won awards for those books. I'm very happy. That's like an amazing thing. But the flip side of it is that I'm definitely in that place of like, well, what do you do now? So I have decided to go on a little bit of a rampage as a writer. I'm focusing on some of my original work, which was in the psychic world. And so I'm going back to that for a couple books, and partnering up with some other authors. I can't say anything yet because we're literally negotiating contracts, but working with some other people there. And then I'm on kind of a mission to help myself and others with daily practice or solitary practice stuff. Specifically creating a solitary tradition for yourself that is something that's empowering spiritually to you, that gives you answers that you need for you. And solitary witchcraft isn't really set up for that. Solitary witchcraft is usually like a lot of spells and discomparted, separated ideas and things that are just kind of thrown at you, and you get to go through a jumble. But if you need a spiritual foundation that is beneficial to you as a person, that's a hard thing to find sometimes. So I'm on a goal to write and develop a lot of content through Modern Witch. That's all about that. So that's my summer. My summer is working on that project. We are going to hopefully have revive Modern Witch magazine and have it come out this winter with a whole beautiful thing that's going to be going on with that. And I got festivals. I mean, I am all over the place, but the goal is to focus on writing and community stuff. But the flip side of it is that I started writing fiction for the first time, seriously. So when I was a kid, I wanted to do it. And I have this like thing as an occultist, and you may, I suspect you would agree. But I have this theory that if you are a successful occultist, then your magic is going to provide fruit in your life, and that is going to provide stability and things like that. So my goal as a fiction writer is to do some of the things I couldn't do as a nonfiction writer, and I am hopefully going to be able to get away with a lot more when it comes to finances and it comes to security, building retirement, those sorts of things. So my goal is to put the magic where the fiction is, and just go there with it. I'm in a good place in my life. I have a lot of interest in my work in a very strange way I never thought I'd have. And it's this really exciting place. So figuring out what to do next is it's hard. It's so hard. But I know I'm focusing on fiction. I wrote a sci-fi novella series that I have out, that is I had to take down, and it's being looked at by agents now. And so there's like a lot of really cool shit going on right now. Like I'm very excited, but the projects are flowing like madness right now. So it's either grab a bucket or put on some sunscreen. It's one of the two, and right now we're grab a bucket. So the creative juices are flowing. There's lots of different projects, but as a nonfiction occult writer, it's going to be psychic development for the next 2 or 3 books, and then I'm going to get into some really deep occult stuff because book sales are slowing down. So it's not so much a matter of like writing the next big book, because that's not going to be happening for a while. Now it's about writing the book you want to write, and getting away with some things you couldn't probably get away with before. So I've got all kinds of interesting plans.
Great.
Yeah, I could go literally go on and on.
Yeah. Yeah. I could understand. I'm very similar and always having a lot of irons in the fire. As we sort of wind down our time here, is there anything that you would want to share with a queer audience about queer spirituality, about your own path that we haven't had time to cover?
Well, I think we kind of hit on something actually, which is that there's this amazing diverse community that we have inside of the queer community. And like you and I had said, having relationships with people who are not our type of queer, right? They're queer, but maybe they're not on the place on the spectrum we are, and listening to their stories and making sure that you are taking the wisdom that they're sharing, because there's wisdom in every story, and you're making space for them and that wisdom. I think that is the number one thing that we, especially as white cis men who are queer, can do in our community right now, is shut up and let some other people talk, make space for that, and really listen. And I think if we can do that, my spirituality was so changed by a trans woman who went by the name of Isis, and I met her at a lesbian dive bar in Cincinnati. And we were on the back patio. It was 2007, and I was smoking an obscene amount of cigarettes at the time, being a broody little, young man. And she came up to me and she said, "Hello, darling, what's your name?" And I said, "Oh, I'm Devin. Nice to meet you." And she said, "I am Isis. I am a goddess." And that conversation changed my life. It was this beautiful trans person who gave no crap about anything anybody would have ever had to say to her. And she gave me and my body dysmorphia and my I don't belong anywhere like headspace everything I needed to feel confident. And if it wasn't for that trans woman, I definitely would have been in a very different place in life. And I think about her every single day. And so listen to some other people's stories, listen to some other wisdom, incorporate it into your own. And not only will you be a better person for it, but the world's going to be a better person for it. Or the world would be better for it, rather.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's such great advice. I appreciate you offering that. So modernwitch.com is the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Yep. You can go to modernwitch.com, find everything there. I am at Mr. Devin Hunter on all the socials.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone go to modernwitch.com, check out Devin's work, check out his books, and connect with him on socials. Devin, thank you so much for being here and talking to us about your particular path in queer spirituality.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. This has been the Queer Spirituality Podcast with Julie and Crosson-Hill. If you enjoyed this show, please consider leaving a rating on whatever site you get your podcasts at. Rating the show allows other people to discover it and be exposed to these ideas around queer spirituality. You can also find my blog and past episodes of this podcast at www.queerspirituality.net. That's www.queerspirituality.net. You can also there find links to the Queer Spirituality Facebook group, my various social channels where you can get involved in the discussion or send me your feedback or questions or things you'd like to hear on the show. Thank you again for listening and for your support. Bright blessings.